Guys, what's up? Welcome back to the video. Eternals is finally here, and in this video, I'm giving you guys a spoiler review and breakdown of the movie, as well as talking about the two post-credit scenes at the end of this video and breaking that down for you guys as well. I'll also be giving my official score for Marvel's Eternals at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. Both always taking more time, let's get into it. I want to talk about some of the flaws, not just the story itself. I thought the biggest flaw of this movie was that there was just too much going on. They pack a lot of not only lore, but they try to develop a lot of characters, and a lot of it just doesn't happen. And it's sad to say that because the characters are like brought up to be so great, but there's really just no good development for them. And one of the examples of those characters is Cersei. In my opinion, Cersei is like Captain Marvel level like development by the end of her movie. It's just not that good. And Cersei is the lead of this movie, whether you like it or not. She really is the lead of this one. And it doesn't feel like that in terms of character development because she's just so put in the back. I mean, obviously it makes sense. There's 10 whole Eternals. Also be doing an Eternals character tier list later on this week, so stay tuned for that. But going back to what I was saying about Cersei, her character just didn't have as much development as a lead should. It makes sense, but I wasn't the biggest fan of it. Nevertheless, I want to get into kind of breaking down the movie itself. So I want to start off with the intro of this movie. I actually thought like the first 10 to 15 minutes before the Marvel logo were phenomenal. I didn't know that fight in the beginning on the beach was going to be in the beginning of the movie. I thought that was going to be a massive set piece action sequence. It wasn't really, but it was a good way to let us know about all of these heroes, their powers, what their subset is, and what they can do. And the way they introduced it was actually really good in my opinion. I was at this edge of my seat. I was ready. I was excited. And it started off with the bang, and I really liked that. Now kind of moving on past the Marvel logo, because it's just a fight scene, you know? It is a fight scene. It shows the powers, and that's basically it. But yeah, moving past the Marvel logo, we see our first introduction to basically humans. It's Cersei, of course, because she is basically the main character in this movie. We also get her chemistry with Dane Whiteman. We get a little taste of her powers whenever she's saving the children in the earthquake. The earthquake was kind of odd to me at first because I was like, number one, why would the little girl hide under a rock? And number two, the earthquake wouldn't be that big, so I was already kind of sussed out from that moment. But nevertheless, moving on, it was just a good intro to humans, and I thought that Dane Whiteman's character was the, I guess, perfect vessel for humans to go through and kind of for us to learn and honestly just get exposition in this movie. It didn't take too long. We got from point A to point B. We got enough of our story, and overall it just made sense how everything was given to the audience. I will say the Icarus intro and the way that they just push us into this whole story with the deviants and the deviants sneaking up in the like harbor area, it's just all really well done in my opinion. And whenever Icarus shows up, he's like, "What can I do for you ladies?" Something like that in a Scottish accent. It is so awesome. His introduction is just so cool. I will say there's a lot of jump scares with deviants that I did not expect to happen in this movie, but I loved all of them. I also love the design of the deviants. They're really, really well done. And then we get into basically just the whole like recruiting part of this movie, which is like a whole hour of this movie. I personally actually really liked it. My favorite recruiting moment had to be Kingo for sure. Kingo is just hilarious, and then his sidekick, I forgot his name, but the guy who records everything, hilarious. I mean, my theater, we laughed a lot at these jokes, and I love whenever like in a theater all of the audience is having a good time. This movie definitely did that for me. Shang-Chi on second watch, it didn't really do that for my audience, and my audience was still pretty packed second watch. But first watch, my audience was really loving the comedy. I don't know, like, and also like one comparison I've been seeing is Trevor in Shang-Chi to the guy on the side, like the cameraman in this movie. I would definitely say the cameraman in this movie is actually genuinely funny. Trevor wasn't that funny to me. For me, it was more of the other side characters in Shang-Chi that were funny, but Kingo and the other camera guy, they were actually hilarious, and their comedy overall just, it was really solid throughout the entire movie. There were a lot of other characters that tried to do comedic moments, but I don't know, it just felt really built into Kingo's character, so I think it worked really, really well. But now I kind of want to talk about like how they utilize flashbacks in this movie. Now, that's probably my favorite part about this movie is how they give context to certain parts of this movie as time goes on, if that makes sense. So, for example, in the beginning, we see Cersei and Icarus's backstory, but we only see that before we see other parts of their story move forward. So it's not really like spoiling the future of their relationship or whatever is going to happen from there, but it gives us more context before we even get to that, before we relatively even get to to anywhere like that, like any kind of conflict between Cersei and Icarus, right? We already know all of their backstory. So the way that they play that out is just so good in my opinion. But my favorite flashback has to be the one where it's like in the Babylon area. I think that's what it is. And basically like Thena almost kills all of them, and she like almost kills Makari, heavily injures Phastos and all of that. And that's when the team initially breaks apart. And that's in the midst of all of them coming back together. And obviously Ajax is already dead and all that kind of stuff. So all of them coming together, I actually thought it was really well done. And that one flashback was, I think, the perfect way to do it. I also love Druig's character after this. Personally, I love Barry Keoghan, the guy who plays Druig. I think that he's a phenomenal actor. Honestly, if you guys liked his acting in this movie, I would recommend checking out The Killing of a Sacred Deer. He's really good in that one too. But nevertheless, Druig was awesome in this movie. He's one of my favorite characters. And I genuinely thought that, and I'll mention the Icarus turning stuff later. I technically called it, but I'll talk about that later. But I thought Druig was going to be the one to turn because he has the most, I guess, the easily like manipulatable power, if that makes sense. Like he can literally mind control people, but I like that they made it to where he couldn't mind control Celestials, and that was, or Eternals and Celestials, whatever, and that was like the whole hindrance on him. And obviously at the end of the movie, his goal was to be able to control Tatumit, I forgot how to pronounce his name, but yeah, I don't know. But yeah, his whole goal was to mind control that character, that whole being at the end. And I like that that's what they were working up to. And I like that he couldn't do that in the beginning. But nevertheless, I thought that's why he was going to be the main bad person. Like I thought he was going to turn against everyone, but he wasn't. He was like the one character that was most closest to humans. I thought that he would hate humans, but that's Icarus. But Druig is so down to earth, and just the way that his character is so connected to humans and actually cares about them. And it's like, I've seen these people like kill and just get massacred and just genocide and all of that for so long. How can I live with myself? And that whole thing is just so interesting to me. And I love the way they played it out. I'll also say the deaths in this movie were really, really good. I did not expect them to kill off this many people. I knew they were going to kill off people. I mean, okay, they didn't kill off that many people, but just, okay, Gilgamesh's death, that one really hurt. Just also Angelina Jolie's performance as Gilgamesh and after Gilgamesh had died, that was really heartbreaking. And that's the only moment in the movie where I like actually almost shed a tear. And I just thought that was such an emotional moment. Obviously, I wasn't too connected to Gilgamesh, and it's hard to connect to one specific character when the movie has 10 characters they're trying to make you care for. So I wouldn't really expect anyone to be super emotional over Gilgamesh's death, but it was still an emotional moment in the midst of the story. So I really like how they did that overall, and the deaths were just actually really emotional. Another character that I want to talk about is Sprite. I did not think Sprite was that good of a character. It's just they kind of did like a weird love thing with her and Icarus, and how, remember like in the movie, like Kingo was like, you're Peter, or Icarus is Peter Pan, you're one of the Lost Island boys, and you want, or Sprite is Tinkerbell and she wants to love Peter Pan. It was just a weird analogy, but nevertheless, it was just a weird thing going on. I wasn't really vibing with it. Sprite just, okay, here's the thing. The actress is great. I love the performance, but there was just really no arc for me to care about a character. So she's one of my least favorite characters just because I don't really care for her. But now I want to talk about the Phastos flashback moment before we get to see him, about the bomb and how he like created all that stuff. I think it was Hiroshima during World War II. That was also one of the most emotional moments in this movie because, first of all, we didn't really know Phastos at that moment, but we knew what he was capable of doing because in the beginning, or earlier in the movie, we saw him making like different materials for humans, such as like the plower and stuff like that. So just seeing how his stuff evolved over time and how he made a bomb and how he feels responsible for the death of all the humans and stuff like that, that all really just brought it to the next level for me, where I was like, I don't know. I really just sympathized with his character at that moment. But one thing I also want to talk about is Phastos' family stuff. People are really mad that there's gay representation in the MCU. The first same-sex kiss in the MCU. I really don't care. I personally thought it was actually really well done. I thought that it wasn't forced at all, and it was a normal family thing to do. So if you hate the movie for that, you shouldn't have watched it in the first place. I actually thought it was really well implemented. But now is where I want to talk about how the movie really kicks into gear. And this is really where it just steps up, how everything just starts ramping up. And we find out that Icarus is evil. Now, I've said that I called this before. And here's the thing. I didn't know that Icarus was evil in the comics. I knew that Druig turned slightly evil in the comics and he did a few bad things. That's why I assumed it was Druig. But I didn't know that, I guessed after the first trailer, I was like, okay, Icarus is going to turn. I think that my reasoning was definitely wrong. I thought it was going to be like Dane Whiteman gets him mad about Cersei or whatever, and then he turns. But that wasn't the reason at all. The reason was actually way better than that because my reason was stupid. The real reason was that he just believes in Aramish. He believes in the whole celestial thing where they like blow up the universe and all that kind of stuff and just make a new one. It makes sense. I love that he kills Ajax. That was absurd. And okay, so in the beginning when we saw Ajax dead, I truly didn't. I just thought it was a deviant. I thought that that would fuel them to go save the world, blah, blah, blah. And I also like how they kick off the whole like world saving, universe saving thing halfway through the movie. And the first half's actually like emotional character stuff. I genuinely like that. And it makes sense because the movie's an hour and a half. So I think, 2.5 hours. So it really does work. But I don't think it'll work for every Marvel movie. I think it works for this one though. The Icarus flashback scene was actually really well done. It was like actually really like heartbreaking too. Like it kind of made sense. And it was like, he was so focused on the mission at first. And you can see at the end of the movie where he realizes he was wrong and stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get too deep into that stuff yet, but I really like the way that they show off the deviants there. They kind of show off Crow's character. I think that's Crow, the main one that becomes super powerful, and he's the one that basically like sucks up the Eternals' powers. I think Crow is actually pretty good, but nonetheless, I want to move on. I want to talk about this final battle, man. The final battle was overstuffed in my opinion. It was too convoluted. There was too much going on, and it was long, and that wasn't the issue. It just felt like there was so much going on that I just couldn't process it and was happening so fast. But my biggest standout for the final battle was Makari versus Icarus. That has to be my favorite, I guess, one-on-one fight or just fight in general, maybe in the entire movie. The way that they utilize her speed is super interesting because whenever you think of a speed, it's just like, okay, you run around someone, that's it, like you punch them a couple times. But no, she was going ham on Icarus and I loved it. I truly loved the way that they utilized her speed. I will say I think it's the best live action speedster we have. I would take her over Zack Snyder's Justice League's The Flash. Personally, I just love Makari. I don't think she's like the best character in the movie, but I still think she's a really great character. I also kind of want to move on through this final battle because there's not too much to talk about. Fastos takes down Icarus and then he like basically like does the comic picture where he like blasts his eyes into the air and stuff like that. It was cool moments. It just felt like there was too much going on, but I kind of want to move on to the end of the final battle, I guess, where Cersei freezes the Titamet. I'm just going to call it Titamet. I don't know how to actually pronounce it, but basically Cersei freezes him, and then we have the Icarus and Cersei scene. But before I get into that whole, like, intimate, like, basically Icarus finding out that he was wrong and just thinking about everything that he did, I will say I love the scale of the final battle and how they showed it. For example, it was just like they were all in just the palm of the creature, and that really put into perspective for me. I was like, okay, this is huge. Like, it's not a joke anymore. And I really hope that future MCU projects really mention this or just give some sort of, like, I guess, batting an eye to this at least, because this is massive. And they played it out that way in this movie. And if they don't mention it in future projects, it's going to be like, what the hell even happened? Like we're just going to completely avoid this? Like, we're just not going to talk about this at all? But yeah, now I want to kind of talk about the Icarus and Cersei scene at the end of basically the big final battle where they're having this kind of like intimate moment where Icarus kind of realizes that he was wrong. Like, I guess that's the whole moment if I interpreted that correctly. But my biggest issue with this, and Gemma Chan, I love you so much. You're a great actress. I loved you in this movie, but it was just not matching Richard Madden's performance. Richard Madden was like going ham on the performance side of things. And I just don't think Cersei's character matched that. Maybe it's just me, but I don't think it matched it at all. Nevertheless, man, then after this whole intimate moment, Icarus dies, I honestly don't know. Okay, so he goes into the sun, right? I think this is a complete callback to the story of Icarus, the man who flew too close to the sun, that Sprite talks about earlier in the movie. And then Cersei said it's just a tale that was made up. I think it's just that tale coming into fruition, showing that it is possible. And I just don't think Richard Madden's coming back in the MCU. I think he's a one-time performance. I don't think Angelina Jolie's a one-time performance from what we see in the post-credit scene, which we'll talk about and break down later. But I do think that it was, I think it's the end of Richard Madden's Icarus. Maybe he comes back in the future. I would be open to it. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I think it's the end. I think he's dead. Nevertheless, moving on, we have like a whole babysitter scene thing with Angelina Jolie's character Athena, we have Makari, Druig, Fastos, and then Fastos' husband and his kid. They're basically in this, like, in the, I think it's an Ajax house, so they're all there. That's a pretty cool scene. It's pretty comedic. And then we move on to basically Dane Whiteman and Cersei, and this is where it gets crazy, okay? Aramesh takes Kingo, Cersei, and Fastos and basically says, you guys are going to pay for what you did. I'm not going to affect these humans because you saved them for a reason, whatever, but I'm going to take your memories. And that was crazy to me. And I thought that, I didn't really think there would be more Eternals movies because I was kind of thinking like, okay, Eternals movie was like kind of set back on a bunch of years ago. Like they're historic characters. There's no need for them to come back. We have this one movie giving context. Maybe it affects the MCU in the future, but I think they're coming back. Obviously at the end, we see Eternals will return. I think characters will return. Like I think Dane Whiteman will return, but I think there's going to be an Eternals too, especially after Aramesh took Kingo, Cersei, and Fastos. But now I want to break down the first post-credit scene for Eternals. So it's basically Makari, Druig, and Athena in the ship, and basically Pip the Troll comes out of some little like magic like teleportation thing. It's not a Doctor Strange portal, but it's like some like glitch portal. And then Eros, the Prince of Titan, Star Fox himself, Harry Styles shows up. He's a redhead now. I couldn't take him seriously at first. But then when he started talking and he got like flirtatious with Athena, and then I kind of realized like that's his character. Like he's supposed to be like that. And I actually really like the casting. I think the casting was a good choice. I didn't feel like it was Harry Styles after a certain point. Like after a few seconds, I was like, okay, this is Star Fox. Like I don't think that it's like. And also, I love the way they introduced him. How Pip the Troll was like the brother of Thanos, Prince of Titan. So I think it was a good introduction as well. Gave viewers context as well, and it gave Athena some like I guess confusion because Athena looked really confused. Makari and Druig look confused, but I guess the camera focused more on Athena, so she probably has more of a connection. Obviously, we know she has a connection to Thanos in the comics, so that will be very interesting to see. Harry Styles' character also says, I know where to find your friends, so that's pretty interesting. I think that will be shown in Eternals too. But now to break down post-credit scene number 2, we see like Dane Whiteman in like this like mystery case. I automatically was like, okay, this has to be the Ebony Blade. So he opens it, it's the Ebony Blade. I forgot like the quote that it said something, and it was like death is blah blah blah. I don't know exactly what it said, but basically when he goes to touch it, like a bunch of the minerals move, and then there's a voice that says, are you sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whiteman? And this is where I went crazy, okay? I watched a movie from the guy that had this voice last night, like the night before I watched Eternals, and I literally, right when I heard the voice, I was like, this is Marshall Ali. If you guys don't know, he's basically going to be playing the rebooted version of Blade in the MCU. I cannot wait for this. And I just had like a light bulb moment when I was sitting in the theater and I heard the voice. I was like, oh my God, this is Marshall Ali. I called it, and I was so excited. I'm so glad that we're starting to get this. And I think that Blade and Dane Whiteman / the Black Knight will be a good matchup, or not matchup, but a good team in the MCU. Also, it would be super cool if Blade kind of mentors Dane Whiteman with the sword and how to use it and all that kind of stuff. I think that they could be really good in maybe some like medieval show, or if Blade makes a cameo in a potential Black Knight show, that would also be super sick. But yeah, guys, now for my final score for Marvel's Eternals. Overall, though this movie is super convoluted, maybe overstuffed at times, there's just a lot going on. There's also a lot of characters that are super underdeveloped and that you can't really connect with, but at the same time, there are a certain subset of characters that you can connect with, and overall, it is such a fun time. The CGI is great. The action is absolutely phenomenal. The storylines are super great. The way that they structure the entire movie is also awesome. Nevertheless, I would give this movie a overall 8.5 out of 10. But yeah, guys, that's it for this video. Let me know what your score for Eternals is in the comments down below. Also, let me know what you guys think is next for the Eternals in the MCU. Like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more future content such as movie reviews, reactions, and more. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.